This is Camp Countdown, a Toronto Maple Leafs podcast series. I'm your host, Kyle Cushman, and on today's show, we've got a big one in store. It's Matt Knies, coming off of his rookie season in the NHL and big expectations heading into his sophomore year with the Maple Leafs. There was a lot of hype for Knies coming into last season after a really impressive first debut performance in the playoffs at the end of the 22-23 season. And I think overall, Knies kind of lived up to expectations in terms of what you could realistically expect for a player. 15 goals, 35 points in 80 games. He was available the entire season, performed pretty well in the playoffs, especially later in the playoff series, scored a big overtime goal to push the series to 6 games and eventually 7 games, had 3 points in those 7 games, all of them being pretty notable points as well. And overall, a really solid rookie season. Top 7 in rookie goals. Only one rookie above him that was on a playoff team as well in goals. That was Luke Evangelista with the Nashville Predators with 16. So overall, you look at all the different factors, and I think you have to give Knies a positive grade for his rookie season. The underlying numbers are pretty solid as well. 6 goals above replacement by Evolving Hockey, down to 2.5 by expected goals above replacement, so some of his on-ice numbers were a bit more favorable than maybe what were expected. Negative defensively was one of those things, but overall, I think you look at the underlying numbers being a positive impact player offensively, hit or miss defensively a little bit depending on whether you look at the actual results or the expected results. I think that's pretty solid numbers across the board for a rookie as young as Matt Knies. It's hard to remember, but he was 21 for basically the entire season last year. Turned 21 in the middle of October. So quite literally, he was 21 for the entire season. He was drafted in 2021, late in the second round. Like, you look at that draft, 2021, there are not many players playing NHL games, legitimate NHL games, for teams drafted outside of the first round. Like, you look at the players drafted outside of the first round in 2021, and you've got guys that have had cups of tea like Olen Zellweger, Ryker Evans, Josh Doan, Zach Ostapchuk, Scott Morrow got into games at the end of last season. You have to go down to somebody like Logan Stankoven before you start getting into the second round and somebody that played meaningful games. But even Stankoven didn't really play until the back half of the season. Knies played the entire full season and played in the playoffs the year prior. The only player drafted after Matt Knies that has made a legitimate impact in the NHL so far is J.J. Moser with Arizona, now traded to Tampa Bay. And he is over 2 years older than Matt Knies. He was drafted as a double overage player in 2021. So he's already 24 years old. So his timeline is skewed quite a bit. So Matt Knies, among players in 2021, is essentially the only guy drafted at his slot or later that has made a legitimate impact in the NHL among the players that are his age. Again, like I said, you have to go earlier in the second round to find somebody like Logan Stankoven at 47th compared to Matt Knies at 57. And then past Stankoven, the next guy that you have to go to that has become a legitimate NHL regular is Wyatt Johnston, all the way up at 23rd overall. So you go from 23rd overall, and then the next guy to play legitimate NHL games is basically Matt Knies at 57, with Logan Stankoven tucked in between, but Stankoven hasn't played the same amount of games as Matt Knies. It's really impressive stuff that I think we kind of forget about when we talk about Matt Knies, because you look at the frame, 6'3", over 215 pounds. This is a guy that you can watch play and you can maybe expect him to be a little bit more than what he is at this stage just because of the physical maturity. But we do forget that this is a guy that was drafted late in the second round only a few years ago, played 2 seasons in the NCAA, and went straight to the NHL. And he's impressed so far in that way. As I mentioned, the positive underlying numbers. In terms of his usage over the course of the season, primarily playing in the top 6 with guys like Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander. There was a little cameo further down the depth chart with guys like David Kampf, Max Domi. There was a little experiment with a kid line with Pontus Holmberg and Nick Robertson. But for the most part, Knies was playing legit top 6 in terms of his teammates. Now, the usage didn't really match that as much. Over the course of the season, Knies ended up averaging just 1341 in his rookie season, which is perfectly fine in like kind of a third-ish line role, but definitely isn't something that you look at as super big usage by any means. That actually dipped by the end of the season, and at the end of the season, he was playing a bit less than he had at points during the course of the entire season, and that led into the playoffs as well. To begin the playoffs, Knies only played 10:31 in Game 1, 14:10 in Game 2, and 12:46 in Game 3. That bounced back to 13:14 by Game 4, and then came Game 5. That's when his numbers started to jump back up. 17:03 in Game 5, and of course the big overtime goal to push the series to Game 6. Gets even more ice time in Game 6, 19:10 in that Game 6 with a big assist on the Nylander goal at the end of the second period. And then he plays 18:43 in Game 7. So over the course of that playoff series alone, Knies went from a guy who had seen his usage kind of decrease over the course of the season, bouncing up when the games mattered most. And that's really all you can ask for a young player, is to thrive in those big moments and get that opportunity. And Knies showed that this season, which is a really exciting aspect going into next season. There was a lot of changes in the Leafs playoffs just because of the Nylander injury, weird stuff, the weird stuff that ended up happening with Austin Matthews and his health situation. One of the few aspects that wasn't really changed over the course of the series against the Bruins was Knies being paired with Tavares on the second line. Games 1 through 4 was with Marner. Games 5 through 7 were with William Nylander, which is a bit interesting because you look over the course of the season, Knies played over 560 minutes with Austin Matthews, didn't really get any of that in the playoffs. Played 440 minutes with Mitch Marner in the regular season. He got that games 1 through 4, ended up playing with Tavares and Nylander the rest of the series. Played over 230 minutes with Nylander, so he played a little bit with Nylander, but not nearly as much as Marner and Matthews. And the part that surprised me is that Knies actually played more at 5-on-5 with David Kampf in the regular season than he did John Tavares. So it was pretty interesting to see how that ended up going down the stretch, partially because the Bertuzzi stuff ended up working out with Matthews late in the year. Domi mixed in there as well. And so due to a few different things, and Nylander being out in the series early and a bunch of different stuff, and Matthews being out later in the series, it ended up being Knies and Tavares in the playoffs. I think going into next season, we all expect it to be Knies and Matthews going forwards. That kind of seems like the logical fit, whether you look at the Arizona ties or just the style of play and Matthews excelling when there's a player that can do the dirty work in and around the net and help set things up in that way. It just kind of seems natural that Knies will be the partner on the left side, at least, to Matthews in the middle. So we'll kind of see how things play out with Craig Berube coming into the fold, but it seems like that's the logical fit rather than what we saw at the end of the season, which was Knies with Tavares. So I hope to see a bit more of the Matthews stuff throughout the entire season, and maybe a bit less of the experimentation with the weird Knies, Holmberg, Robertson, Domi, Camp, kind of weird experiment stuff. We've seen what Knies can do over the course of a full season. It's good stuff. He's proven he can play a full 80-game slate. He's proven that he can be good in the playoffs after an 80-game slate. Let's see him legit minutes at 5-on-5 with those top guys. Because even while he was playing those minutes with those guys, he wasn't getting the same kind of usage, where he was getting kind of 14, 15 minutes throughout most of the season. There were some handful of stretches where he got to 16, 17 minutes, but he never really was a consistent player all the time alongside those guys at 5-on-5. And I think Knies has shown enough to at least have earned an opportunity to do that throughout the regular season. The other aspect that has really surprised me was the power play usage for Knies. And I never really understood why they didn't get him more touches on the power play. Because for young guys coming into the NHL, so much confidence comes from just getting puck touches and being a guy that can put the puck in around the net. And not getting those power play minutes completely takes away an opportunity for a young player to gain that confidence that bleeds into 5-on-5 play. And for Matt Knies, he only played 50 minutes on the power play in the regular season. And for context, Calle Yarncroke played 65 minutes on the power play in 52 games compared to Knies in 80 games. In the playoffs, Nick Robertson, who was scratched for a game, played more on the power play than Matt Knies. And obviously, this comes back to kind of their role on the power play, where Robertson is somebody that is going to be a threat off of the flanks, whereas Knies is going to be more of either a bumper player or a net front player, most likely. And for the Maple Leafs, when you have John Tavares on Unit 1 and Tyler Bertuzzi on Unit 2, there isn't really a way for Knies to really mix in the way that you want him to. So that's something that I'm looking to change going forwards, is Knies definitely needs to be on the man advantage way more than he was as a rookie. And with Bertuzzi not being in the fold anymore, and there being no notable additions at forward at all, it's something where there's a lot of opportunity for Knies going into next season, in addition to the extra usage at 5-on-5. So without further ado, I think it's best to just jump right into my conversation with Sportsnet's Justin Bourne. A great conversation with him, all about Knies' game, expectations for next season, and even some contract talk at the end of it. I know we hate the contract talk in Toronto, but Matt Knies, he's an RFA next summer. Sign him now, sign him after the season. We get into all of that and more coming up in my conversation with Justin Bourne. Very excited to welcome on Sportsnet's Justin Bourne to chat all about Matt Knies. Justin, thanks for taking some time today.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, so Matt Knies is the player you wanted to chat about. Why was he the guy on the Leafs roster that kind of stuck out to you as somebody that you wanted to dive into today?
You know, I think he's the guy with the most room for improvement, the guy who can take the biggest step and be the most impactful, coming from a guy who, you know, wasn't that impactful. He's a 35-point guy last year, and it just felt like as the season went on, I don't know, you were waiting for something more, and then in playoffs, I saw it. You know, I saw this like version of a guy where like, that's what it is. That's what they need. And it feels like if he's that now and he has a season of training to go into it, like he's a player to be really excited about, I think.
Yeah. And the playoffs is kind of the first time that we saw Matt Knies was essentially in the playoffs last year as a rookie. What did you see from Matt Knies that was different this year in the playoffs, having a full season under his belt versus that kind of debut performance jumping right in?
Remember that first year? I mean, if Florida was a physical war, right? He ends up getting hurt, but it felt like a roller derby or something, or some sort of monster truck rally where I have to believe coming out of college hockey, you're on the rink with Sam Bennett running around, and just like, it just must have felt like, holy hell to Matt Knies. Like, what a big jump. But this year he anticipated that. And I thought he was, instead of reacting, he was proactive and took it to players a little bit more. I just feel like he has a confidence in himself. He tries to make moves and make plays at a level where you're like, we don't do that here. You know, we get it in deep. But he does try little things that makes you think that he thinks he's something different and special and can be a contributor. And so seeing that in those big moments, I feel confident that going into this year in the regular season, he's going to have some strength. He's scoring more than 15 goals this year. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and so scoring 15 goals as a rookie, he was top 7 in terms of goals among rookies. The only rookie that scored more than him that was on a playoff team was Luke Evangelista with 16. So right in that ballpark for rookies making an impact on NHL rosters. Obviously, we talked about the playoffs and him kind of being that playoff type performer, but what did you see from him in the regular season and kind of his evolution over the course of the year?
Weird year, right? Because he came in the year before in playoffs, and I said he was kind of starstruck, not starstruck, but just kind of frozen at times by the whole thing. But he still showed enough flashes that going into the year, they're like, this guy's a top 6 guy, and he got great opportunity all year. And it felt like, who wouldn't get some points playing with Matthews and Marner and some of those guys, right? Like, you pretty much felt like he was at the floor of how many points a player with talent in that role could get. So I think there was frustration at times where it was just, is this guy going to take steps? Is he going to be the player we thought we saw there? And then the first epiphany I had that maybe the whole thing was a little bit much for him was that Pittsburgh game where he was awesome. He had been hurt. He missed 3 games or something, 2 or 3 games, and he came out rested and was electric. He had a Gordie Howe hat trick, I think, in the first period.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Right? And it was like, okay, like maybe it's just been they threw this kid on a treadmill at like max speed, and we were like, oh no, he doesn't look great in that, and like give him a sec. So when he had a little rest and he looked good, it was the first moment I had where I was like, okay, maybe with a little more time here, this is going to come for him. And I looked at his stats before we talked today and was reminded that he's not even 22 yet, which is wild because he's like, this big monster of a man who's already, had parts of, a couple of years experience.
Yeah, 2 playoff runs under his belt, and he's not even 22 yet. 2 seasons in the NCAA and as a second-round pick, and he's straight into things. And so the physicality, and you mentioned like him being perceived as like this power forward, manly type player, not even being 22 yet. I think that's the part that excites so many Leafs fans, is that kind of unique element that the team has either lacked or hasn't really had in past years. Mm-hmm. What is it about his kind of small area play, his board play, forechecking, kind of the more physical elements of his game that really excite you?
There's a lot. Like, I'm a big Knies guy, which is why I want to talk about him. But first off, I'll just say that the small area play with the puck is he can make people miss, which a lot of big guys can't. And to make people miss, you have to be confident in the small areas that if you get hit, you're not going to end up on your ass. And he does seem to have that where he's like, he's unafraid to try kind of a little move here and there, which I do like. The other thing is, I think he wants to be a physical player. Like, I think he, playoffs this year showed a little bit of like interest in like, what is it like if I push back here? What is it like if I lean on this guy? And I think he's going to find that size as he gets older and fills out. Like, I just know through my own career, I was not at all a tough player. But as I got older, I got to a point where I felt I deserved more respect from people, where I was just like, you can't do that to me. Like, I'm not new here anymore. And I think once he gets a bit more of that, I'm not new here anymore. He wants to be physical. He's not afraid in those areas. I just think it's going to be it's going to come naturally to him. And also, it's like, is that not exactly what the Leafs need? Is in playoffs a guy who can be like, hey, F you, and I'm going to be in the paint. And you see how that works in the playoffs.
Yeah, and in the playoffs, it felt like the Leafs lineup was all over the place due to a bunch of different reasons. But one of the few constants was Knies alongside Tavares in the playoffs, which is a bit interesting because he actually played more with Matthews over the course of the regular season. Yeah. Which bit do you kind of like more? I think it's pretty likely that we'll see Knies in that top 6 role alongside one of the two again, rather than kind of that weird domey young kid line that we saw tried a little bit. It feels pretty likely that we're going to see Knies full-time alongside one of the 2 main centers there. Which fit do you like more alongside Matthews or Tavares there?
Yeah, I think Berube's going to love him, right? Because he hasn't seen any of the development. He's just going to get this kid when he's like a monster with experience. And he's be like, wait, why don't we have him on the ice all the time? I think with Matthews makes a lot of sense. If you look at who has had success with Matthews in the past and helped him have success, a guy like Zach Hyman is in the paint a lot, banging in rebounds and taking up an area of ice that draws a defenseman saying, okay, I have to be in front of the net because there's a guy there. And hopefully that leaves some space around the outside for a guy like Matthews to work. When it's not Hyman, then it's Bunting. Like, there's always something with someone with Matthews that seems to be able to draw people there. So Knies can definitely be that guy. And Tavares, I'm not even sure, what to expect of his usage this upcoming year. Definitely a Matthews spot for me.
Yeah, and one of the more uncertain parts is maybe the special teams usage for Knies, where last year they tried him a little bit on the penalty kill and then kind of softened on that as the year went on. Mm-hmm. But one of the more surprising parts was that he wasn't really a factor on the power play at all over the course of the season. He was like an 8th, 9th guy in terms of the forwards and playoff use or in power play usage. In the playoffs, Nick Robertson had more power play minutes than Knies did. Is that something that surprised you as well? And kind of, do you see that role kind of taking, or the special teams role being more of a factor for Knies going into his sophomore year?
It's a great question. And talk about stats. Like, if you're a fantasy hockey guy, you got to believe he's going to get more opportunity. And like, he has a chance to, I don't know, is not, maybe he'd be a 55, 60 point guy next year. Like, if he plays power play, and maybe I'm high on that, but like, I think it's there for him. I think he'll get more opportunity. It's just, what is the role there? And it's got to be net front. So puck recovery, net front sort of guy. Is he willing to just be that? I understand why they don't want him to necessarily be a shooter on the outside. You don't, Robertson has a all world, top 2% of the NHL shot. And other guys are such great puck handlers that you're not going to have Knies in the perimeter. So it's a matter of, is he your number one net front guy? And, I can't think offhand who else is going to be there unless you think, like, is he going to take Tavares' spot there?
Yeah, because last year it was Tavares kind of in that spot, and then Bertuzzi, who's gone now. So the spot is at least opened up if they want him there.
Yeah, it definitely feels like he's going to be there. Like I think Berube's going to love him. So definitely a high fantasy value guy compared to last season, I would think.
Yeah, the one stat I saw that shocked me is that Järnkrok had 65 power play minutes in 52 games, and Knies had 50 power play minutes in 80 games, wow. Which
that is a little absurd.
Right? Like it's one thing if it's like close and like you're trying different things. Järnkrok has like a sneaky shot, but like
he does.
That big of a difference for a young guy that you want to get offensive touches. It was pretty surprising to see just how stark the difference was.
Yeah, the one thing I think with the Leafs power play and all NHL power plays in general now is they really are specialized roles, and it's like, if you're not the power play quarterback or you're not the flank point guard, so to speak, or, you're not this sort of this or that or whatever, it's like, if John Tavares plays 82 games and he's the net front guy, it's like, there's no spot there. I played hockey with plenty of good players who, maybe got drafted by a team that was just loaded and they couldn't get a look. Sometimes it's like, there's just not a spot there. It seems like this year there should be an opportunity for him.
Yeah. And so looping back a bit to why he's like a net front guy instead of being one of those flank players, what do you make of his shooting ability? We talk all about the physicality, the net front ability. What kind of did you see from Knies in terms of his offensive game kind of away from that net front and some of the things to work on there?
Matthew Knies almost never had the puck this season. Isn't that a crazy thing? I actually need to go look at the possession stats. I looked at it like halfway through the season, and like every time he got a touch, it was like quick to someone else, quick in deep. Like all his goals were like he had it on his stick for 3 seconds and, he went to his backhand on the goalie or something. Like I try to remember him like lugging the puck up the ice through the neutral zone. Like it doesn't come into your mind. And, I think he's got to get more comfortable with that as a ball handler, so to speak, because right now he's a guy who just kind of, and that's like Zach Hyman, who's, a guy that everyone loves so much right now. But I'm asking this honestly, do you remember him beating a goalie from distance?
Not really, no. It was all like either quick plays, like the two kind of ones that stand out to me in the playoffs, where there was the Marner assist where he chips it in over the goalie, the overtime winner, which is a quick play from Tavares burying a rebound, and then the big assist on the Nylander goal in Game 6, I think it was, is a quick spin around, I think it was McAvoy, and that's another quick touch there. It's all quick passes, quick touches, things like that. Yeah, I'm gonna be going back and clipping a bunch of stuff tonight for that, but I can't think of like one off the top of my head. I think there was maybe one rush that like comes to mind. I can't remember what team it was against, but it's all very much like quick plays, even on like the goals and stuff like that. Yeah,
like it's not hard to call up. Nick Robertson rushing the puck through the neutral zone, or like it is. I can see those things, but I can't see Knies with it a ton. So that if you're looking for elements to work on, it's, can you be more impactful in driving possession by having the puck at times?
Yeah, and it's definitely in his toolbox because we saw it a bunch in the NCAA with Minnesota as well. Like he played with Logan
and in the
Cooley.
ozone in the NHL. Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah, totally. And so obviously part of that is going to be confidence playing with some of those top guys, but he's definitely got it in his toolbox. So if we can see more of that would, and Berube coming in, hopefully some more rush attack and stuff like that will play to that strength as well. On the defensive side as well, we saw Knies tried out a little bit on the penalty kill.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that was just due to a lack of penalty killers early in the season. What do you make of his defensive game?
I like it. I don't have any problem with the way he plays. He stops and starts. He's not like a fly the zone early type of guy. I think he cares about being an all around hockey player. And again, I'm just like such a big fan. I would be interesting to flesh out the idea of him killing penalties. It's not like he's lightning quick. I don't know about him blocking a pile of shots or anything, but he's smart and he's big and he's positional. Like I said, he doesn't cheat. And at some point, you're not looking for much more than that on the PK. Um, some of it comes down to rotation, where if you have, like if Marner and him killed together, let's say it's Marner, Matthews, and Knies. If Marner and Knies kill together, then you just have Matthews ready to go with them. Doesn't mess with the lines. But if he's on a different line, you're pulling one from. So they're part of it might have been strategy for Keith, like just making it easy on line changes and stuff. But I would be shocked if his special teams minutes on both sides of things don't go up this year.
Yeah, it was pretty surprising to see kind of him almost be used more on the penalty kill at times this season than the power play. But yeah, just given his frame, it makes sense for him to be used on both sides as well. So looking ahead,
I think of him. Do you remember the movie The Emperor's New Groove? You're probably too young for you. But he's Gronk to me.
It's in the role. Yeah.
Okay, he's Gronk to me. He's just this whatever. Like he gets a job done wherever you put him. I love the guy.
Love it. So looking ahead to this upcoming season, we expect him to be in the top 6 kind of throughout the entire season. He has that freshman year under his belt now. We expect more power play and potentially even penalty kill time as well. What are your expectations for him coming into this season? There are always the sophomore slump stuff, but there's also the players that take that step as a sophomore as well. What the changing of the coaching staff as well. There's a lot of factors coming into this upcoming season. What are you expecting to see from Knies this year?
Just a massive change in time on ice. Like I don't know. I don't know if you're on your computer and could pull it up, but maybe he's a 15-minute.
Yeah, it was like 13 and change in the regular season.
Was it that low? Yeah. So it just felt like he was always sort of complimentary and never the guy. Like, he was never really about him. I think there'd be more moments where it's like, they got to get Knies out there. He's one of the guys who can go through someone, one of the guys who can get, make a handsy play to score a goal. So I just expect more minutes and more impactful without the puck too, like on the forecheck, making D rush plays and helping turnovers, again, screens and drawing defenders to him. Right now it felt like he's done a little bit of watching the greatness that he's been able to play with rather than saying, I'm great too, and trying to, handle, I guess, draw the attention. And imagine what that would do for the space of the other guys if all of a sudden he's a little bit got some gravitational pull too, which right now it doesn't feel like he's had as much.
Yeah, so in the regular season, it was 1341. In games 1 through 4 in the playoffs, it was 1240. In games 5 through 7, it was up to 1819. So that just kind of goes to show how big of a jump he took there at the
6 minutes extra per game. They're like, that's one of the guys we got.
Yeah, not bad there. Yeah.
That is wild. God, I haven't spent a ton of time reflecting on things.
Yeah, totally.
And it is insane looking back at the Nylander and Matthews injuries in that series and the game 7 OT loss. Oh, what could have been. Just makes me sick all over
brutal.
again.
It's brutal. Yeah, but hey, that's the Toronto Maple Leafs way. So
it is. My daughter had soccer tonight. I was down in the beaches here in Toronto, nice. and I saw Chris Tanev, his kids in the same 4-year-old soccer league. He's a giant of a man. So maybe that's it. Maybe that gets him over the hump this year.
Yeah. Hey, if you're talking about like a prototypical, like perfect fit for what the Leafs have needed on the back end, it's basically Chris Tanev. So you can quibble all you want about the contract, but the fit of the player, if he's healthy, is fantastic. And just to wrap up here on Matt Knies before I let you go, obviously the talk is about the 2 main players without a contract past this season, and Marner and Tavares. It's also the last year of Knies' entry-level contract. Would you be looking to push and re-sign Knies earlier in the year and try to get that done earlier, or is that something you'd be comfortable leaving on the back burner given kind of all the other big decisions that have to happen?
I like the idea of teams saying, we have identified this player and we believe he's going to be good. We've seen him at the NHL level and we see it, and let's get him before the numbers reflect something. Maybe we can save $1 million or $2 million per year if you really believe it. I think if every time you felt that way, you went a little longer on a guy, I don't think you'd come out regretting it. I just believe you have a pretty good idea internally, a lot of these teams. And I would like to see Knies locked up to something with a little bit of term. It doesn't have to be max term, but It's so funny. You look at the deals around the deal. Engvall's on a 7-year deal. Nick Paul's on a 7-year deal. Like there are some
There's some
weird
weird
contracts
ones.
out there.
Well, geez,
If I,
for so long, Kelly Yarncroke was the one that was the weird one on like
yeah,
a 7 or 8 year deal. And yeah,
right. And if I told you, you had Matthew Knies for 7 years and he's not even 22 yet, you probably feel pretty good about the years you were going to get out of him. I don't know that he's ever going to be Tom Wilson, but if he could be a little bit, I guess a more offensive, less mean version of that, you'd feel pretty happy about it. So, yeah, I don't think you'd mess up with getting that guy onto a contract before he does put up 55 or 60 points and he's 6'3", 220, and you're going, that's going to get really expensive the next time around.
absolutely. Justin, thanks for taking some time here in the summer to chat about Matt Knies. Let us know where we can find your work and plug anything if you'd like to.
Yeah, just at JT Bourne on Twitter is where I do most of my wordsing, and everything's at sportsnet.ca, my home.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks again to Justin for jumping on here to talk about Matt Knies. That's going to do it for today's edition of Camp Countdown. Be sure to check out all the previous episodes to find out more about a bunch of players coming into Maple Leafs camp. We'll be back tomorrow for more Camp Countdown. See you then.